I'm thrilled that you're joining me here. My name is Marilyn Evans. I'm the founder of Parents Aware and host of the Media Savvy Moms podcast, the podcast that is leading the conversation about parenting and pornography today. Everybody goes through it, and yet it can still feel uncomfortable, awkward, embarrassing to talk about. But does it have to be that way? Today, we're tackling the topic of puberty. I want to know what we can do to help our kids make the transition through adolescence a little smoother, a little less awkward, and most importantly, less fraught with questions that could lead them to searching online if they think mom or dad won't talk about what's going on with their bodies. So, why do we get so nervous talking to our kids about sex? Well, I am super excited to introduce my guest today. Her name is Rowena Thomas, and she is the facilitator of Amazing Me, an organization based in Sydney, Australia, that provides programs to schools and resources to parents like you and me about sex and puberty. If you are looking for a way to talk to your child about the changes in their body, this is the woman to turn to. I believe that she has read and reviewed almost every book on the subject. She has more than 25 years experience as a primary school teacher. As well, she is a mom to 3 adult children, and she and her husband run a charity called Project Help India. At the end of the show, we'll make sure you know where to follow Rowena, but I found her on Instagram and immediately fell in love with her work. It's fun, it's bright, it's happy, and part of her mission is to normalize the conversation around puberty. And that's exactly what we're here to talk about today. So welcome, Rowena.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit more about yourself. I know I've introduced you, but there's a whole lot more. What led you to do the work that you do?
Well, it was a really long time ago that I began, and there wasn't much around, and that's basically the reason why I started. I was a teacher, and I knew a lot of principals at the time, and I contacted them and asked them would they like me to help them run some programs in their schools about sex and puberty, and that's how it started.
So you saw a need, you filled the need. That's amazing. So, what is your favorite aspect of talking to preteens about sex and maturation?
Well, actually, I don't just talk to preteens, I actually talk to teachers as well and also parents.
Uh-huh.
And so I run parenting programs, just parenting programs. I run teacher programs, and I also run parent and child programs and in school programs too, just with the children. My favorite part of everything is definitely the parent and child programs because I'm empowering families to talk together about a subject that they might not have talked about, or they might have talked about a little bit, but they're there. They're answering questions together. And most parents are always really grateful that I've been able to facilitate discussions in their families and strengthen their relationships and open conversations. My in school programs are great. I love it too. And yeah, that's just because we talk about something that is not often talked about, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. So really loving that chance to empower families and get them talking about things that were awkward, like I said at the beginning, that felt embarrassing and uncomfortable. Do you find that they leave feeling less embarrassed?
Absolutely. They come in feeling really awkward. You can see it. They tell you. And then the questions that I ask them facilitate discussions between them, the
Mhm.
parents and the child. During the day sessions, everyone's awkward, but I'm so used to it. It's like telling you what I ate for breakfast. So, uh, from that, they see that I will answer any questions. So it still is embarrassing, of course, but I love empowering them. I love giving them knowledge. make wise decisions in the future. Basically, that's what we're all about, isn't it? And to give them self-esteem and to know that they're normal.
Yes.
They're fabulous and can do amazing things.
I love that idea of giving them information to build their self-esteem.
Mhm.
So, after 25 years of teaching, I'm sure you have some idea of what kids are most curious about. So, uh, I do want to talk for a moment about that preteen or early teen age. What is that age group most curious about? And are there trends that have stayed consistent over the years, or is there anything new that's crept up?
Well, I do think that kids are like sponges,
Hmm.
and I think every child is different and unique, and their knowledge and their experience is all very different. So basically, what I do is start from the very, very beginning, and I talk about our bodies and how amazing they are, and I give them accurate information, and I'm really funny as well. I talk about things in a really funny way, so it means that we're all having a laugh, and that is really important when it comes to this really private, awkward stuff. But I think often that uh, children are not full of shame and guilt, and they don't really see it as a taboo subject until we make it that way as parents. So I really encourage schools to start their puberty education in year 3 or year 4. It doesn't often happen that way, but that's my ideal age to start this conversation, even earlier.
So, what age is year 3 and 4? So it's a little different.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah. Okay. So they are 8 and 9.
8 and 9. Okay, no, that makes
Definitely.
sense.
And,
Yeah.
puberty is starting a lot earlier than it ever has. So I meet 9-year-old girls in particular that are going through puberty, as you know. So I just think before it actually happens
Hmm.
is a great age to start, because when it's happening, it's just awkward. They don't want to know about it as much because they're feeling so awkward.
Hmm.
But before it, even when they're toddlers and they point to your hair and or your breasts or whatever, you can just say, when you're a grown up, it's going to happen to you.
Uh-huh. And
So
then do they look
normal.
forward to it more then if it's talked about earlier, do you think?
I think that yeah, you can talk about it in a very different way compared to when it's actually happening. I think you can talk about the positives. You can talk about you can anyway, what they're looking forward to. That's another thing too. I always talk about the positive things and not just the negative things.
Mhm.
And what we can all look forward to when we go through puberty. So, will they be more excited when they're younger? I'm not sure about that, but it's just different because they're not going through it. We can normalize it more in our everyday conversations if it hasn't started yet. They know that we've already talked about it. It's like anything, pornography, sex, anything. If we start really early, then they know that mum and dad are open to talking about it. So they're going to come hopefully back and talk to you about it. But if we start the conversation when they're 12 or 13, it's going to be much harder for you. Never too late, but much harder.
You are definitely speaking my language. So you
Yeah.
said, I talk about the positive things too. Give me an example. What's something that you would talk about that's positive about puberty?
Okay, well, I always start off by, what are you looking forward to when you grow up?
Uh-huh.
And I say, are you looking forward to getting taller? Are you looking forward to staying up later? Are you looking forward to one day have a family? I mean, that's sort of down the track because we do talk about reproduction as well.
Uh-huh.
But all of that couldn't happen unless you went through puberty. The feelings, are you looking forward to maybe being attracted, maybe being attracted to somebody, or um, uh, going out and being more independent? All of these things, leaving school, driving, all of these things, none of them would have happened if you didn't go through puberty.
And I can only imagine that the kids are would get excited about that. They would see their older siblings or the adults in their life and see what they're doing. And of course they have ambitions to grow up and do some of those things themselves. That would be very empowering.
Yeah, so I think often we think of it in a really negative way.
Mhm.
Like we think, oh, puberty is going to be terrible. Our kids are going to grow up. I mean, it is hard. let's face it, the whole thing's hard. But if we think of it in a positive light, then it can change our perspective and it can change the way that we talk about it. And we can also, I think it's really important that we bring in our own personal experience. So I got my period when I was 10 at the end of year 4, which is when I was 9.
Wow.
And I had no idea what was happening to my body. So I, at nearly every single talk I do, I tell them about my story.
Mhm.
And you have a story. Everybody has a story about puberty, the great things and the really difficult things. And if we can start off by using those stories, they are so powerful with our kids.
Okay, so I asked you what's new. I'm thinking back to my first experience with sex education. Since we're talking about our stories, I remember being in grade 4, which, how old are you in grade 4? Probably 10, 9, 10. And the girls were taken into one
Yeah.
room and the boys were taken into another room. And we didn't talk about it together until a couple of years later. So is that the way you run the program now, or is it everyone together?
I try not to run the program in that way.
Uh-huh.
Just like our families are all different, just like every part of our lives are different, it depends on the school.
Hmm.
So some schools, and I go into public and private schools. Some private public schools are really conservative too. It's not just the private.
Hmm.
Often we're saying that the private schools are the conservative ones. They're often the ones that I can talk about pornography in. I can't often talk about them in the public schools. So it differs a lot. And so most of the time, I, at the beginning when I contact a school, I always mention that I really like talking to them together. I think that's really important. But if a school pushes for the single sex differentiated classes, then I go with it because I want to talk to them
You
anyway.
just want to talk. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Gotcha.
why do I think it's important? Well, it's pretty basic. I think it's really important that we all know about one another so we can respect each other and we can accept one another and we can be kinder to each other.
Hmm.
And none of that will happen if we don't know about it. I love it. You were mentioning before, what are some experiences that I have are the boys understanding periods
Hmm.
and actually talking about them. And they often talk about them more than girls do. And so I love focusing on the different changes and that everybody is different and unique and special and diverse. Our families, our gender, everything is different. And that's okay. And even if somebody is really, even if a parent is really conservative, I strongly encourage you today to talk about the things that are out of your comfort zone that are coming up in the media. Maybe that is gender, maybe that is pornography, maybe that is other things, families, and not shielding your children from them. Not saying to you, like I get some calls sometimes from parents in really strict Muslim schools or Christian schools saying to me, I'm not going to send my child to this class. Send them
Hmm.
because I think the basis of discrimination, prejudice, sexism is actually people not opening their child's eyes to what other people believe in. And you think in the end you're actually protecting your child and making them open, but in actual fact you're not because you're not presenting other people's ideas to your
Hmm.
child. And in this day and age, anyway, we can't do it.
I agree. Send your kids to the class. Be aware of what's going on in the class so that
Yeah.
when they come home, you can talk about it and you can talk about it within the context of your values. And then you don't even have to worry about what's being presented in the class because your kids are going to have questions and you're the easiest person for them to turn to ask those questions. So,
That's right. And, our families are diverse, our families are different. So we need to be really talking about everything, no matter what we believe, and being respectful and accepting. And we can't do that. We can't do that if we don't know about it. We need to be talking about every single thing that we believe in order to tell our child what we believe.
mhm. Okay, so I think we've covered a little bit about you. We talked about the advice to give moms and dads. But we've talked about what to do in terms of school, but what about at home? Like, what advice would you give to moms and dads if we're still nervous to talk about sex with our kids? You said your favorite program was the parent and child program, so you
Yes,
must have some tricks up your sleeve that you can share with us.
I do. Look,
I think you told me you have 25. I don't know if we have time for all 25.
well, to start off with, it's really hard. Okay, we're faced with just, we talk about kids being bombarded with information. Well, we are too. There's opinions, there's just so many different things, and we were brought up in a different way, and technology is so different for all of us. I mean, I'm old, I'm 55, but even for younger parents, 30-year-old parents,
Mhm.
they the way they were brought up is very, very different to how our children are being brought up now. So we need to get with it. We need to get educated. We need to know what's going on. When our children are young, we need to be one step ahead of them. And the only way that we can be one step ahead of them is if we get acclimatized, and we get to understand what they're interested in, what games they're playing online, what movies they're watching, and not make all this stuff secretive, not make it a taboo subject. How can we not make it a taboo subject? By basically talking about it as early as you can. So private, public parts, the right names of our bodies. From the moment they're born, we can start introducing these things. And how? By being proactive, by normalizing conversations in everyday ways, in the bath, while they're toilet potty training, while you're changing their nappy, that's a diaper, all of these sorts of things. Consent, asking your children questions and giving them bodily autonomy by, telling them that they're allowed to change their minds when it comes to different things, and helping them to be resilient. It goes on. So I think the first conversation's often the hardest with all of these things. So once you start, keep on being brave. It's not easy. Look after yourself. You're going to stuff up. Say sorry. I'm constantly saying sorry to my kids.
I
Um,
love this. I love that you're just like, it's hard. You've said that to us 3, 4, I don't know, maybe 5 times already. Like, this is you are an expert at this. You've been doing it for years, and you know that it's still going to be a little bit hard, but it gets easier as it goes along. So I love what you said. Be brave, just do it, get over that hurdle. Mhm.
Yes, and you're not going to answer them in the correct way. Remember, everyone always says this, it's bite sized conversations. It's not just the one talk. And we all know that. If you sit your kid down and try and talk about pornography, sex, puberty, consent, body safety, hello, you'll be there the whole week, right?
Yeah.
And you'll just get all mumbled up anyway. And
And their
it's
eyes will get glazed over and yeah.
yeah, they're not going to listen to you. They're just not. So if you start early with all of those really basic things, uh, like your body parts, like growing up and changing, that's not like all of this conversation is not just one thing. Often we think of sex as just sexual intercourse and gender.
Mhm.
It is so much more than that. It involves feelings and relationships and consent and respect and kindness and all of these things, which is a lifelong conversation anyway. So,
And anyone can talk about kindness, right?
yes,
Anyone
yes.
can do that. And you
And
just tie it into relationships.
yes, and you're modeling it. Practice
Mhm.
what you preach. If
Yeah.
you're fighting all the time in all of your relationships and telling your kids, you do what I say because you're the child, they're going to grow up thinking that when someone tells them in a sexual relationship, maybe that they just have to do what the person says.
Mhm.
The imbalance of power in relationships. So what I'm saying, all of this is a part of life, and we're born as sexual beings. So it's all a part of who we are and our relationships and everything. And if we think of it like that, then sometimes I think it takes the stress out of it a little tiny bit, because we're not perfect.
Yeah.
So a parent rang me the other day and said, my daughter asked me what a 69er was. And I just clammed up and I said, that's disgusting. Don't talk to me about it. And she was really upset because she said, I didn't want to be like that. I didn't want to be that parent.
Uh-huh.
And I just said to her, go and say you're sorry.
Yeah.
Go and say, I'm really sorry. I got a bit of a shock when you asked me that question. You can ask me anything.
Yeah.
And then she's actually not asking what a 69er is. She doesn't even know what sex is.
Yeah.
She's actually just heard it at school,
Mm.
and she wants her mum to be an open, or dad to be an open and honest person that she can come to and ask anything. So if you're just constantly shutting down those conversations, uh, then they're not going to come and ask you,
Yeah.
even if you don't mean to.
Uh-huh.
So that's what I mean by the word sorry is a powerful word. So even if you're not feeling calm, pretend that you are, fake it. Say to them, thanks for asking me that.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that. I'm actually a little bit shocked that you asked me that question, but I'm so happy you asked me.
That's great. That's a great answer. Mm-hmm.
Stuff like that. I don't know that answer, but I'm really proud of you for telling me. What do you know about that? They're not probably asking you what it actually is. So you actually need to find out what they want to know.
So
And the only way that you're going to find out what they want to know is by asking them questions, open ended questions. I'm so proud of you for asking me that. Where have you heard that word? Or what do you know about that? Or are any of your friends? I often make it third person as well if they're a bit older. So, have you heard about, has anybody looked at pornography online at school? Rather than saying, have you looked at pornography? If
Mm-hmm.
you know your child has, you might ask them that question instead. So making it less confronting.
Okay. Well, speaking of pornography,
Yeah.
how, in your experience, how common is exposure to pornography at the earlier ages, at that, let's say, age 9, 10, 11?
Sure. Look, as you know, everyone's research says that the first exposure to pornography is 10 and getting younger.
Mm-hmm.
Look, in my experience, I can kind of tell if a kid's looking at pornography, has seen pornography, and often their friends at school will know about it, and they'll snigger and they'll laugh, and they'll ask me a question in the question box. And I
Mm-hmm.
haven't actually mentioned that, but that's one of my most favorite parts of any day.
Love your question box, and then you
I
often
love
share
it.
some of those on Instagram, and they're wonderful. That's why I thought you would know the answer to this question, because your students do ask you lots of anonymous questions.
Yes,
So
they
you're
do.
saying that by the way that they're behaving in class
Yes,
and by the way they're asking questions, you can kind of gauge what they've been exposed to online.
yes. And do I think it's common? Look, a lot of kids haven't seen it.
Mm-hmm.
I would say,
That's
and
reassuring.
like in my experience anyway, in the 150 schools that I teach in, maybe it's different in other countries and different parts of Australia. That's just my experience. Or they're just not telling me,
Mm-hmm.
or they might have heard the word but they don't really understand what it means.
We know we need to be careful and we need to prepare our kids, but not assume that every child has seen it. And so that changes how we approach the conversation.
Definitely. And also, if you've never talked about sex
Mm-hmm.
with your child, then you can't just say, oh, pornography is people having sex in a really violent way, because I don't even know what sex is. I do think we need to, as soon as your kid gets online, so I do think we should be talking about it with 4 and 5-year-olds in a really age appropriate way, um, by just saying naked pictures
Mm-hmm.
and not making it a taboo subject. That's how we need to start the conversation about pornography, because it's like any sort of safety, body safety, child protection. It's about swimming. Like, you're not going to throw your kid into a swimming pool, are you, if they don't know how to swim?
Mm-hmm.
So I think prevention with pornography is important. But the thing that I find difficult about pornography is nobody wants to say that word. Very few schools will let me. The private schools will let me say pornography, but the public schools in general won't.
I see what you're saying. So it's not just parents that are struggling to say
No.
pornography, it's schools that aren't willing to acknowledge.
Oh, no, no, no. I wouldn't even say that. They want to,
Uh-huh.
but they don't want the parent flack from it
Okay.
because they will have many parents knocking down their door saying, "How dare you talk to my child about pornography?"
Uh-huh.
Because basically, at the heart of all of this are a certain number of parents that are really fearful. They fear that because we're telling them about pornography, that we're ruining their child's innocence and that they're going to go and look at it.
Okay.
When in actual fact, it's the opposite.
Mm.
They're empowering them to be more innocent, I
Especially
believe.
if we're framing it in a conversation where we're bringing awareness to the harms of pornography.
Yes.
Mhm.
And you can do it in such an age appropriate way. Anyway, I get around it. I say inappropriate pictures. I say naked pictures. I say people showing each other private parts.
Mhm.
But then, of course, then I have to talk about the museums and art and going to the doctors. And, there's always an exception to the rule.
Always, yes. Don't
So,
overcomplicate it, but yes.
yes.
Okay, well, we have to wrap up, it's been lovely speaking with you. We're coming to the end, so I'm
Yes.
just gonna ask you one more question, and then we're gonna do a bit of a recap. Can ongoing sex talks prepare our kids to thrive in a media-saturated world? What is your vision of the future?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it should start in preschool when they can talk. And I think we need to think about. I always say to parents, think about the end outcome. What do you want for your child when they grow up? You want them to be confident. You want them to be consensual, respectful, amazing human beings with fabulous sex lives that give them pleasure and that they're confident. Basically, that's what we all want, don't we, in the end? And so, how are you going to get there? That's what I say to them. So, yes, I definitely do in an age appropriate way. Yeah.
That sounds fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to try to do a quick recap. Um,
Sure.
and you said at the beginning that kids are like sponges, but have a laugh. So if we start this conversation with some humor, then we're going to get past some of the awkwardness. You told us multiple times that puberty is hard. It's hard on kids, it's hard on parents, it's hard all around. So don't worry if it's a bit of a struggle at first, keep going. Um, Bring in your personal experiences. Kids love that. I love that you mentioned that. Move out of your comfort zone. Talk about things you're not that comfortable talking about. And sorry is a powerful word. And I love at the end, you said, think about those end outcomes. What do you want for your kids' future? And start the conversations today to help them get there.
Mhm.
So, what challenge do you have for parents?
Okay. The challenge is to be proactive, to say to them, first of all, can I tell you a story about what happened to me when I grew up? Can I tell you a story about how I found out about puberty?
Mhm.
Because for me, just really quickly, it wasn't even mentioned in my house.
Okay.
So I got my period. I thought I was bleeding to death. It was really sad.
Yeah.
So I had no idea because it was like when I was 9. So maybe tell a story that way that your child can relate to. And maybe in terms of pornography and sex, you're driving somewhere because that's the best place to talk to your kids about anything, isn't it? Because they can't get out of the car. And also because they're there and you're listening to the radio and you hear something on the radio, a song on the radio. And my challenge is to ask them, hey, what's this song about? Because most songs are about sex.
I am going to embrace this challenge. I don't know what I've shared with my kids about me going through puberty. We talk about it, but I don't know if I've put that personal spin on it. I have all boys, as you know, so that should be an interesting conversation, but I'll bring Dad in and he can talk about some of his experiences too. We'll do it in bite sizes, just like you said. So I'm going to take you up on that.
And you know what? I think it's really important, as I said, that we're not just, I do find in some single sex schools that I go to, the dad comes if it's a boys' school and the mum comes if it's a girls' school. But I really believe that your boys want to hear it from you
Mhm.
just as much as their dad, because that just brings in a whole new dimension of respect, which is what we all need in today's society with everything.
Love it. So, Rowena, where can we find you?
Okay, well, I have an Instagram account, and that's amazingme.education. And you can go onto my website. I'm actually doing a new website as we speak, which will be out in 4 weeks. And I'm bringing out a puberty online digital course, which is exciting too, for parents and kids to do together. And you can email me as well.
Thank you for taking the time across the world to come here and be with us.
Oh, thank you for having me. I've loved it.
Thank you again for joining the conversation. If you'd like more information about what was discussed in this episode, visit our detailed show notes at parentsaware.info. And if you simply want to follow us on social media, we are at Media Savvy Moms on Instagram and parentsaware /Media Savvy Moms podcast on Facebook. Until next time, keep talking.